there's something about a joke that kind of has a way of disarming people, helping people let their guard down a little bit, to where sometimes you can help people maybe see things a different way through humor. And something that's kind of magical about laughter, especially, is involuntary. If someone makes a good point in a funny way and you laugh at it, there's a truth in that joke that you're laughing at, whether you are a Republican or a Democrat. You can go to a Dave Chappelle stand-up special or a Louis C.K. or Bill Barr or whatever, and hear things that you don't agree with. But a lot of times that little nugget of truth that they're touching on and speaking in a clever way, it unexpectedly makes you laugh, and you're kind of involuntarily acknowledging some truth there.
And welcome back to The Narrative. This is Center for Christian Virtue President Aaron Baer, here with my co-host and our policy director at CCV, David Mahan, where we're unpacking the toughest issues of the day. And on this volume of The Narrative, we're going after the issue of woke capitalism, diving into everything that we're seeing going on in corporate America. Last week, if you didn't catch the episode with Vivek Ramaswamy, you got to go listen to that one. Vivek really is eye-opening on what is happening globally in corporate America, but even taking it from that massive perspective down to the ground level and what it means for us and our individual purchasing decisions and even where we're investing our money. This week, we got a great guest, good friend, Joel Berry from the Babylon Bee. Babylon Bee has blown up over the last few years, but they've got a really fascinating perspective right now, especially when it comes to what's happening with big tech, what's happening with these social media companies that are silencing voices like the Babylon Bee. So we're going to have a great conversation with Joel. But before we get there, we're going to dive into some of the big news stories of the day, things that we're seeing that might have gone unseen. And I think that the best example of that, you have a number of stories all tied together here. I know a lot of times when we're doing this, we kind of pop story to story to story, but there's a thread where that I want to walk with you all to connect a lot of different things. We're going to go from backpack bill all the way to Roe v. Wade. So ride with me here for a moment. But I want to start with the fact that Arizona, where I used to live, my old state, has now become the second state in the nation to pass the backpack bill, to give every kid in that state a scholarship, an empowerment scholarship account, to a taxpayer-funded scholarship to attend the school of their choice. And obviously, this is something we promote big here in Ohio. It's something that we're driving we want to see happen all over the country. But I want to just kind of pause here and just dwell on why this is so important. And I'm going to get into it a little bit more here with something we just saw from the National Educators Association. But Dave, I think back to when, we twisted your arm to leave behind the work you were doing before this to come work at CCV and, really hold you hostage to do this over a year ago now, almost 2 years ago. But one of the things that hit was really the backpack bill. And I want to kind of let you riff for a minute here on why it was the backpack bill in particular. You came actually to a gala we did with Andrew Brunson. Yeah. And was a turning point for you to consider leaving what you were doing to come be our policy director.
Yeah, well, I had felt the leading of the Lord to advocate at a different level and had been invited into different venues, to where I could learn what that could look like. And I started hearing within like a matter of a few weeks, I started hearing, the business sector talking about children. And, being a youth pastor, I'm like, man, I wish more people would talk about the needs of kids and meeting the needs of kids as opposed to just raising funds on kids. And sometimes even in the church, it was like, we all want to talk about, I believe the children are the future, but how much do we invest in the next generation itself? And for you to be saying that in all that CCV does, we're really going to be turning in the direction of providing for the needs of young people, not because it's a good idea or we need to rate, because it's the only way we win. It's the only way to win the future. And that just made a lot of sense to me. And then I watched you to see if you'd actually do it. And here I am, not because you twisted my arm. I feel like God twisted my arm. And he still twisted my arm because I got to put up with you every week. But man, I've seen this thing in action. I mean, you look at the backpack bill, you look at SafeAct, you look at Save Women's Sports. Roe v. Wade is kids, and it's so important. But I'm really encouraged about the backpack. Many times I get, even from legislators, but also just from laity, folks who aren't policy wonks, they're wanting to know where we at with the backpack, and I've never been more encouraged just because everybody's talking about it.
Right.
I can't drive in, into the office in the morning without hearing like somebody like Hugh Hewitt talking about the backpack bill and the need to support something like the backpack bill. DeVos talking about, backpack type funding.
Right, yeah.
Everybody's using the word, even if they don't, they want to tiptoe around the actual bill here in Ohio. They want to use the word because they know what's up. So, yeah, I appreciate you, Aaron. You're definitely a gifted guy. You definitely heard God on this thing.
This is
definitely heard God bringing me here.
Just
to
took
the
four
office.
4 volumes to get to a point where David could say something nice about me. I just marked this down.
Definitely
took 4
heard God
volumes
on
and
this
20,
one, man.
20 plus episodes to get to a place where David could. But I do want to, the reason why I wanted to start there is because it leads into a big story that just drives home again that if we're not talking about reforming how we educate children in America from the ground up, we're not serious about helping kids.
That's right.
And not even just helping kids. I want to go bigger. Saving our country, if you will. That's everyone talks about that. We got to save our country. The country's going off course. When you really understand how big the problem is, you have to recognize that's not something that can happen overnight. That's not something that can happen in one election. Goodness, that's not something that can happen through one term of a president who appoints every judge that we could ever ask and do amazing things through his all the power he's got. It's something that takes a generation. And that's where education just is the ballgame. It's something the left identified years ago, decades ago, centuries ago in many ways. But it's something that we've got to get serious about. And that's why, passing the backpack bill is not the end of the fight, but it's the most important structural reform we can do. And the best example of that most recent one is something we just saw from the NEA. If you're not familiar with the NEA, it's the National Educators Association. It's the largest teachers union in the country. It's over 3 million teachers nationwide.
One of the largest unions overall in the country.
Exactly. And they are an ideological machine. They are the number one reason why when we start talking about education and folks start talking about school boards, I get frustrated. Not because it's not worthwhile for us to be engaged with school boards. We need to be engaged there. We have to be a voice at every place where there's an elected office. We need Christians running and being involved. But we also have to understand that school boards have very little control over what's actually happening in our classrooms today. And this is a great example of it. The NEA, with all of their 3 million members, just passed a resolution through their annual meeting on abortion. And their resolution, this passed 3-1 as a resolution through the NEA, through their membership. And the resolution says the NEA will publicly stand in defense of abortion and reproductive rights and encourage members to participate in activism, including rallies and demonstrations, lobbying and political campaigns, educational events, and other actions to support the right to abortion, i.e. kill unborn children and harm their mothers. Also the right to contraception and a person's decision about their health. This was a resolution that the largest teachers, nothing in here about providing quality education to kids, any of that, just pushing a political agenda. This is what the largest teachers union, the people that are in our classrooms, think. And it's the point that I always come back to, and I've used this example multiple times with folks when I describe the situation in education. The reality is, it was like when I was working in Arizona for the Attorney General's office, right? Mark Brnovich brought in all new leadership staff, but the office had 1,100 employees. It was physically impossible for him, and practically impossible for him, to come in, fire all 1,100 people, and replace them with his folks. Right? You just can't do that. There's too many jobs to fill. There's too many people with certain specialties that have been trained to do something. So the best you can do is bring in new leadership to oversee and help make sure everything in the office is being done in line with the vision of the Attorney General. Imagine that problem, but increase it 1,000-fold. Right? We can't. The problems in these schools are individual teachers that are choosing to push things like LGBT ideology, push things like abortion and politics in the classroom. And Dave, this is when you were teaching in the public schools, teaching sexual risk avoidance and character ed and all these types of things. This was stuff you saw.
Yeah, and it's not that they're even, talking about the issue, right? They're just saying, here's what you need to think about abortion, and we want you to go out and advocate for it. Now, we've been saying this forever. We've been seeing this forever. Policy wonks understand this stuff. But I wonder, does the average person understand what's going on in these classrooms? And what I mean by they don't even know what's going on is like, okay, if you want to advocate for abortion, then know the facts. But when I go into a classroom in middle school and high school, and we're talking about fetal development, how old were you when you looked like this at this stage? How old were you when you looked like this? And 90% fail? Then why are we even talking about abortion? They don't even know what a baby is. They don't even know like what real science says about life. And here we are just going to go ahead and just slam them right into advocacy roles. But yeah, the amount of indoctrination is taking place. In Columbus Public, I heard somebody the other day say 39% of Columbus Public Schools students can't read by third grade, to the third grade reading level. This is the last thing we need to be talking about is activism. We need to teach kids about how to read, science, math, colors. I mean,
no, honestly,
we need to back way up.
I think I told some of the staff about this, but our church does this program where we help families that are on the brink of their kids going into foster care, so we'll do. It's kind of like respite care for kids. So parents, if they've fallen on hard times financially, or they're going through rehab or something like that, their kids don't fall into the system. If there hasn't been violence or abuse or anything like that, of course. And so there was these two girls that our church was helping, and once a week, we would take them, have them come over for dinner, and take them to the library, play around, that kind of thing.
Never had me come over for dinner.
Nah, we only the good ones we bring over, right? For years. But
racist.
There was one of the girls, 9 years old, and my wife took him over to the library, and she'd just play a scavenger hunt with them and say, okay, everyone go find a book with a dog, about a dog, and they'd go around and find and bring the book over. Mm-hmm. Or, hey, everyone go find a book with a big letter K on the front, or something like that. And what my wife soon realized was that the 9-year-old, couldn't read, couldn't identify letters. Yeah. Our 3-year-old was identifying letters. She couldn't even identify letters. And this is a girl that has been pushed through every grade level in Columbus Public her entire life. Has been attending, and I mean the level of that academic failure is so severe. And then you throw on top of it the politicalization of what's going on. And I like. There's obviously a lot of factors that go into this, and this is why we say backpack isn't the cure all to this, but it's the beginning of reforming this system. I want to. This leads though to another topic though, this conversation around abortion, because obviously in the post-Roe world we live in right now, it's dominating headlines. It's everywhere. We were. It's probably been about 2 weeks full of headlines in the Columbus Dispatch on abortion, all of them talking about how terrible it is that abortion's now essentially illegal, that our heartbeat bill's in place. And we got one semi-good headline story out of the Columbus Dispatch where they put us on the cover of the Dispatch. However, their headline made it sound like we got in trouble because it said anti-abortion groups were disciplined.
Disciplined, yeah.
As if we were sent to the principal's office, as opposed to we were disciplined in our strategies, what they meant. But one of the headlines that has been going around recently is the story of a 10-year-old girl, allegedly a 10-year-old girl was sexually assaulted in Ohio and had to go to Indiana to procure her abortion, is what the way that the media has been pushing the story. Now, there's a few things here that I want to unpack with this, because this is quintessentially one of the reasons why we wanted to start this podcast. Is we did not want to be afraid to talk about difficult issues, right? And this is maybe as difficult as it comes, and we want to help folks think through it, give our perspective on how to understand these issues, and so with this story in particular, there's a handful of things that we need to unpack. First and foremost, there's no way around it. This is an absolute tragedy, and there's whatever this child's gone through, and assuming this is true, and even if this story is not true, we know this has happened, and this does happen, and it's a result of a broken world and a hypersexualized culture that views kids as sexual objects, and so, but setting all that aside, how do we actually think about this and how we advocate on abortion? The bottom line on this is that you don't resolve or heal a tragedy with murder. Nothing makes a tragedy better by taking an innocent life, and that's essentially what folks are advocating for when they say that this is why we need to have legalized abortion. The other aspect of this is that no just society would ever punish a child for something terrible that their father did, and that's from a pure what is right, what is just, what is righteous, as a public policy, as a law of the land. You can't have righteousness if you're saying I'm going to kill a child because their dad did something terrible, and that's what the situation is. No matter the circumstances that it came about, which are horrific, and you can hold, we're complex beings. We can hold two things to be true: that something awful has happened to a child, but it's also wrong to kill this other child. And that's the conversation we're having here. But Dave, I know you have a whole other element to add to this.
Yeah, what we have to understand, family, is that abortion doesn't help anybody. The only thing abortion does is take a life. It takes a life and it damages another life. It doesn't help anybody. And the reason why I bring this up is because I'm hearing this a lot, even in the church. I had a conversation with somebody just last week who was saying, but I'm still struggling with, abortion in the case of rape and incest. And I said, so you think that they need to be able to do what? If somebody is raped, they need to be able to do what? Have an abortion. No, let's not hide behind that word, right? We've been desensitized by that word. What should she be able to do with her child? And then he couldn't say it. Listen, that's all I want to do. In the church, let's get to that point where we cannot hide behind slogans and branding, because we know who runs that game, yep. Right? We know in the Bible it tells us that the enemy is going to be better at that, wiser, than some of us in the body on the marketing and branding stuff, the prince of the air. However, can we just talk about what it really is? And here's one just example. This girl's 10 years old. I was in a classroom here in Ohio. I'm talking to a 14-year-old child who volunteered for 3 summers with her grandfather's clinic. 3 summers volunteered, doing paperwork, seeing women come in, pregnant, leave not pregnant. She saw this. When I showed what a 12-week-old baby looks like, and she comes up to me afterwards crying, and she says, is that what it looks like? I said, what do you mean? She had me pull the slide back up. And this is just fetal development, right? This is science, biology. She said, is that what a baby looks like at 12 weeks? Yeah. Eyes, ears, arms, hands, suck his thumb, all kind of stuff. She started just breaking down crying, and she told me why she was crying. And then she just walked out of the room. She said, I had no idea. Supporting this activism. Her grandfather owns a clinic. She's in there working and had no idea what we're talking about. So I'm not even in about, the debate of pro-life. Can we just know what we're talking about? Yeah. The body of Christ, pastors, can we at least make sure that everybody in our congregation knows what we are dealing with before we make the decision? Yeah. That's all I wanted.
When pastors argue this, I think they don't understand the gravity, and because of the messaging you're talking about, they don't understand the gravity that they're talking about, and understanding that abortion, that woman is participating in murder.
Yes, those women in your church who never seem to want to talk, you can't seem to get them involved in any of the activities and ministry. You can't. They're so gifted, but they won't sign up to help anybody else. Many of them don't feel like they deserve to help somebody else or even advocate for a kingdom concept for somebody because of what they've done. Yeah. I'm telling you, I'm all over the country working with pro-life directors and staff and volunteers, and I'm telling you, most pastors have no idea how many women and fathers men in their churches have dealt with this issue personally, had abortions. And that's why so many, I talked last week, we talked about the need to support these centers. It's not just about going in there telling people don't have abortions. No, we're in there talking about earn while you learn, making sure that while they're learning how to be mothers, they're getting the material aid that they need, fatherhood programming, abortion recovery programming. Because so many women and men in these churches are sitting there and there's nobody telling them the truth. They're just under condemnation, that the devil's eating them alive, sitting right there in the congregation because we are afraid or inept to talk about this.
And that's the thing that these churches are missing, that these pastors are missing, is how do we really believe how damaging sin is to our souls? How damaging, and especially a sin like abortion.
And if we don't even call it a sin, we won't even acknowledge that the grace of God is the only thing that's going to heal this woman.
Heal it and be there and be willing
she
to
will
address
remain broken.
That. And yeah, well said, Dave. Well, we're going to go ahead and break there because we got Joel hopping on here in just a minute with us. Grateful for you being here. Hey, if you are enjoying the narrative, we've appreciated all the folks that have given us reviews, who've given us 5-star ratings. Hey, we even appreciate those folks who've given us 1-star ratings. The fact that you're listening, we'll take it. But if you can, go hop on whatever platform you're on, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, give us a review, Google Play, give us a review, write a little note of encouragement, or tell Dave that he's got to get a haircut today.
I'm still trying to get that office. They still got me in the closet, family.
But we're going to be right back here on The Narrative with Joel Baer.
Christian business owners today face more unique and challenging threats than ever before. As corporate America and chambers of commerce fall prey to woke capitalism, Christians in the marketplace need an advocate to protect their First Amendment freedoms. As Ohio's only Christian Chamber of Commerce, the Christian Business Partnership stands in the gap to advocate for, to educate, and to celebrate Christian business owners. Joining the partnership also allows businesses to provide their employees with healthcare insurance, workers' compensation, and exclusive banking and educational discounts. To find out more and to join, go to ccv.org/cbp. That's ccv.org/cbp.
Welcome back to The Narrative. This is CCV President Aaron Baer here with my co-host David Mahan, with a very special guest this week to continue in this volume on woke capitalism, our good friend Joel Baer. Joel is the managing editor at the Babylon Bee, which you've all heard of. I don't need to tell you about the Babylon Bee. If you don't, go look it up, go to the website, have some fun with it. Actually, click on the articles. Don't just read the headlines. They'll appreciate that for you, so they can get that good ad revenue. But Joel started off as a super fan of the Bee, and I actually remember we had lunch. I feel like just months before you started writing for the Bee, you sent one article off, and then all of a sudden now you're the managing editor, and you've written now 2 books with the Bee, the Babylon Bee Guide to Wokeness and the Postmodern Pilgrim's Progress. Ugh, I can get that out.
Tongue twister, yeah.
I know, right? But Joel, thanks for joining us, man.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a thrill to see you guys.
Yeah. So Joel, tell us, one, I think your journey to the Bee is fascinating, but just as interesting is why has the Bee all of a sudden blown up? I feel like it started off as, really just kind of a niche inside Christian joke kind of thing. And now all of a sudden it's huge. It's you got Elon Musk tweeting about it. You got everyone talking about this site. Why has the Bee blown up the way, and how did you get there?
Yeah. So it's hard to believe the Bee isn't as old as it seems. It started in 2016 during the presidential election, before Trump was elected. And it was founded by a guy named Adam Ford. And it was really inspired by what The Onion does. So if you're familiar with The Onion, they write very dry AP style news stories that are satirical in nature, usually to make a point or just to be silly. And shortly after the Obergefell decision, when the Supreme Court redefined the meaning of marriage, Adam Ford read an Onion headline that went something like, 4 Supreme Court justices suddenly realized that they're going to be the villains in an upcoming Oscar-winning movie. And it's kind of funny, even though you don't agree, they're coming at it from a leftist perspective. You don't agree with it, but it's still a clever quip. There's probably some truth to it. And Adam had the thought, why isn't our side doing this? Why aren't Christians and conservatives doing this? So he thought he founded the Babylon Bee just as kind of a side project, not really thinking it was going to take off. And it went viral within weeks, just instantly, just an overnight kind of success.
So was he an actual Onion writer? Did he write for the Onion actually?
No, he wrote a small, he's actually a former atheist himself, a late convert to Christianity. And he started doing a little Christian webcomic that had a very small following online. And he kind of just put it out to his webcomic fans. Hey, I'm starting this thing called the Babylon Bee. And a guy named Kyle Mann was a fan of the webcomic at that time. And Kyle now is the editor-in-chief. And he just started sending in headlines to Adam Ford, and it just took off from there. But you're right, it started off mainly as kind of, inside church humor. The one of the first viral stories we did was Holy Spirit unable to move through congregation as the fog machine breaks. It's a Babylon Bee classic. But it things got political fairly quickly because, if you'll remember, we're doing church humor. Then suddenly Trump is elected, and the church was kind of really thrown into turmoil. It really split down the middle. Can Christians support Trump or can they not support Trump? And that kind of became a huge question in a lot of people's minds. Obviously, we see how things went over the next few years, but the Babylon Bee got so much material just out of that kind of that central question of can Christians support Trump? And Trump was such just a massive over the top character that was, and he was so hated. No one else really knew how to satirize him. When SNL imitated him, it was all with kind of this sneering hatred, and it wasn't funny. But the Babylon Bee really, I think what made us successful in those early years was we just kind of started picking up the low hanging fruit that none of the other comedians were touching. We saw how, late night comedy got really, really partisan and really hyper focused on getting Trump out. And that's the way a lot of comedy went. And so, and then the kind of the wokeness stuff came into the picture. And there were a lot of things that comedians could no longer joke about. And so I think a lot of our success, not so much maybe our skill as comedic writers as much as we're just the only ones joking about this stuff that's actually funny.
Good timing.
Wokeness is hilarious. The CRT stuff is hilarious, and it just took off from there. It's been a blast.
I'll say one of my favorites still is folks remember back, this was probably 10 years ago when Planned Parenthood came out and said abortion was only 3% of what they did. And one of the headlines said, Bill Cosby says rape was only 3% of what he did. At this time. And it was like, oh my God.
I think my favorite stuff is when I'm on Facebook and I see somebody, post something that you all put out thinking that it was real. That's what's funny to me.
Well, that's the thing. We're so close to reality, often to the point of only being a few weeks behind reality. A lot of our headlines come true. And so it can be, unless the Babylon Bee and you kind of do that double take, okay, it's just satire. Sometimes people believe our stuff. Yeah.
Well, and again, that just sort of shows the absurdity of the moment, which, it's become a thing unto itself, which is another bee prophecy fulfilled, where you guys write what seems like an over-the-top headline that's very clearly satirical, and then weeks later, it's somebody actually says it or somebody actually does it. So again, that's all stuff you can find on Twitter and find online. But I want to talk, Joel, in particular about because of how big the Bee has gotten, and because of the platform that you all have built, and in the space that you've built it in, right? This is typically a very liberally dominated space, not just the comedy space, but the social media space, the online space. You guys have had an experience with, woke capitalism, but in particular big tech that most have not. If I'm right, the Bee's Twitter account is still not active, or not is still suspended. And you guys just got kicked off TikTok this week. Is that right?
We got kicked off of TikTok. Yep. No reason given. Just kicked off. Yep.
Yeah. So tell us about what has been the Bee's experience with these social media giants and the interaction they've had and what you guys have been able to see.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been quite a journey. I think we were lucky to get in when we did. I think we were able to gain a following before we kind of got on Facebook's radar. I think we would have been squashed a lot earlier had we not been able to kind of go under the radar as long as we did. But a few years into the Bee's existence, kind of the first big interaction we had was with Facebook when Facebook announced that they were going to partner with Snopes as their official fact checker.
Yeah.
And so Snopes started crawling through our website and fact checking our articles. And the very first one that they fact checked was a headline that went CNN purchases industrial sized washing machine to spin the news before publication. And so there was this big Snopes fact check. They rated it false. And then we got a warning from Facebook.
Public service announcement.
Yeah. We got a warning from Facebook saying that it was either a warning or they shut us down altogether. It was like, you've been sharing misinformation and we're taking your site down, or we're limiting your reach or something like that, and we kind of came back so forcefully and publicly against that they kind of ended up backing down. They ended up ending their partnership with Snopes. And we made fun of it. So we got so much material out of it. We just made fun of Snopes for a year. It was great. But
what were they thinking? Like, who in the world would think, that we've seen them do ridiculous fact checks where they're not actually fact checks. You know what I mean? They spin articles. That's one thing. I almost want to set that aside because you can see there's a political motivation there. This was so stupid to go after that headline. I mean, did you guys ever get a sense of did they actually think this was right, or
did they interview somebody from CNN?
Right.
They did. I mean, they would go all the way with these things. They would call the producers, they would analyze footage, like they would have 12 people on this story to debunk it. It was bizarre. And I think there were two things at play here. I think on one hand, I think there is a certain segment of the kind of the fact checker space that really does take themselves seriously, and they do think that they are saving the world from deadly misinformation, and they genuinely do think conservatives are dumb. So early on, there was a study that was done at Ohio State that was published in Christianity Today, if you remember, about satire. And what they did was they took 10 of the Babylon Bees headlines and 10 of the Onions headlines, and they stripped them of their comedy. And they took the photo out and the logo out, and they sent them out to a survey of 5,000 people and said, "Do you believe this story or not?" So, our headline about Ilhan Omar saying that what was the headline? If Israel is so innocent, why do they insist on being Jews? That was our headline, The study took that headline and rewrote it to say, Ilhan Omar stated to reporters that being a Jew is an inherently hostile act, and do you believe that? So they took the comedy out, and they turns out 50% of the survey respondents believed their rewritten headlines of ours. And so
I would actually believe Ilhan Omar said that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It was believable. And that's what makes it good satire, because it's
right.
believable. And so that turned into a big Christianity Today story. Conservatives are believing fake news at alarming rates. We need to do something about this, And so that story came out, and then Facebook did something different. After they ended their partnership with Snopes, they kind of created a fact-checking program, like a grant program. And what they do is they partner with hundreds of what they call trusted media sources, like USA Today, Newsweek, the New York Times, PolitiFact, Real Clear Politics, folks like those, and they give them grant money to fact check things that get published on the website. And so when they instituted that program, we suddenly saw kind of an avalanche of fact checks against our headlines. And I did some research into this. And it was interesting because there seemed to be no rhyme or reason when it came to the stories they chose. They wouldn't necessarily go after just viral stories. They would just pick it almost seemed like they were giving it to a random intern or a low-level employee. Hey, I just needed to go on Babylon Bee and fact check two of their stories. And so we just started getting pinged left and right from Newsweek and USA Today. Like USA Today fact checked our story that Trump had proposed putting a space navy on the moon after they found water on the moon. That became a false, misinformation strike against us. And so what all those fact checks do is they get fed back to Facebook, and they become part of their news ecosystem quality score, their NEQ score. And that's how that's a secret score that they don't disclose to anybody. And that's how they determine like what material is right for the world and what's wrong for the world, and if something's bad for the world, then they'll decrease its reach. And so we started to see our traffic on Facebook go down quite a bit. And then we reached a huge tipping point when Trump shared one of our articles during the 2020 election. And he shared it on Twitter, and he didn't quite let on that he knew it was satire, or it almost seemed like he thought it was real. And so that became kind of a news story for a week. And after that, Facebook just crushed us. Like we never saw any traffic really on Facebook after that. And from there, yeah, we've seen problems with Twitter. Obviously, we're off of Twitter. We were kicked off of TikTok, and most recently, our email system, Front email app, dropped us inexplicably. So it's something that we're always. Yeah, Linktree is another one. We used Linktree for some of our web stuff, and they dropped us. So it's a constant battle with these woke corporations. Very ideologically driven woke corporations that are opposing us.
Well, Joel, I thank you for breaking all that down of how people are looking at you, and even I joke about how folks look at your stuff and think it's real. What is the objective of the Bee? I mean, I'm not an Onion guy. I'm a Saturday Night Live guy. That's what I grew up on. And as a kid, I'm gonna just be real. I thought some of that stuff. That's how I got my political views a lot as a kid. Sadly enough, and I've repented. However, what is the main objective? Because humor can be a tremendous play a tremendous role in the culture. What is your intended objective with it, and is it succeeding? And I would say probably it is if everybody's coming at your neck like they are.
Yeah. Well, our stated mission is that we want to speak truth to a post-truth culture, and we use humor to do that. So we are trying to entertain, we are trying to make people laugh. Those are kind of secondary, objectives of what we're doing, but ultimately we're trying to point to the truth. And I think especially nowadays, we have very short attention spans. We're being bombarded with information from all sides constantly. People aren't really prone to sit down and read a 12-page think piece or a well-researched book, but they might happen upon a witty point made in a Babylon Bee article on their news feed as they're scrolling through social media. And so one of our favorite little quotes that you may have heard us state it many times in other interviews, but we love this quote from G.K. Chesterton. And he says that truth can get in under the door while seriousness is still fumbling at the handle. And there's something about a joke that kind of has a way of disarming people, helping people let their guard down a little bit, to where sometimes you can help people maybe see things a different way through humor. And something that's kind of magical about laughter, especially, is involuntary. If someone makes a good point in a funny way and you laugh at it, there's a truth in that joke that you're laughing at, whether you are a Republican or a Democrat. You can go to a Dave Chappelle stand-up special or Louis C.K. or Bill Baer or whatever, and hear things that you don't agree with. But a lot of times that little nugget of truth that they're touching on and speaking in a clever way, it unexpectedly makes you laugh, and you're kind of involuntarily acknowledging some truth there. So I think there's some power to humor, and that's our goal. Is we want to speak the truth. And I think another thing is we want to tear down idols. We want to tear down those sacred cows. I think one thing that I was talking about with some friends the other day, if you've read The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, talks about death.
We've had Carl Trueman on this podcast before.
Have you really? Oh man, I would love to meet Carl Trueman.
He's phenomenal.
He talks about death works that the left has set up, to kind of tear down the sacred things of our culture, and in a way, the Babylon Bee, we're kind of creating death works of our own against the sacred cows of the left. We're tearing down things that they deem sacred, that they take very seriously, that they're very self-righteous about, and we're picking it apart and showing it for the absurdity that it is, and then laughing at it. And that's when you're laughing at something, there's no defense against that. I mean, once people are laughing at you, it's over. And I think that's what's so powerful about humor.
So Joel, I want to stay on this just for a minute. It's something that we get quite a bit. I get quite a bit, especially when we start talking about things like Backpack Bill and the public schools, where folks will say to us or say to me, well, you're being really harsh, or you're, that's not very winsome, or that's not very kind. and I will say, like, this is something we talk about here with the nature of our work. We're not doing satire, we're doing public policy.
Yeah.
And we do want to reflect the fruits of the Spirit. That's not something we take lightly, but there are times where we want to speak clearly. How do you guys respond when folks say, "Oh, what you're saying is very hurtful," or Jesus called us to gentleness and not being quarrelsome, things like that?
I think that it's very important as Christians that we always at least keep that in mind. That is a command from Scripture. We are to be gentle. We are to be loving. Our speech is to be seasoned with salt. And we're to bring grace to those who hear us. That said, I think that the other side has kind of wised up to the fact that that's a very precious value to Christians, and they've weaponized it against us in a way that intimidates people from telling the truth. You can tell the truth in a clear, gentle, and winsome way, and you'll still be called, a bigot, a hateful person, homophobe, whatever slurs they throw at you. It doesn't matter. And you look to the example of Jesus too. I mean, he's the perfect example of grace and truth. He always spoke very plainly. He spoke very hard and difficult truths, always through grace, always in love, and they still killed him, and
the cross is an offense to those who are perishing. Absolutely.
And so, we try to follow the example of Jesus. Obviously, we're not going to be perfect at that, but there's Old Testament examples too. You look at the prophet Elijah. There's that classic line that he gave the prophets of Baal as they were dancing around the altar, begging for Baal to send down fire and consume the sacrifice. And the prophet said, hey, why don't you guys dance and chant a little louder? Maybe your God is in the bathroom. Maybe he's deep in thought. That's classic Babylon Bee mockery right there. Yeah. Another example is even Jesus, when he said that it's easier for a camel to walk through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. I think that's a little humorous hyperbole there that he's using to make a point. And so we kind of see ourselves as following in that tradition. I think it's important to be kind and gracious, but I think in the world that we live in, especially right now, buzzwords like love, kindness, acceptance, understanding, equality are being used and weaponized to do some really, really horrific things, especially to children. And I think we have to be bold to call that out wherever we see it. Yeah, I mean, we have no choice.
No, I think that's spot on, Joel. And I'll just add, I think about Ecclesiastes when I think about these types of things of a season for all things. Again, so we're squaring these calls and commands to be, gentle and not quarrelsome and be seasoned with salt and all of these, with also God's word tells us there's a season for war, right?
Yes.
There's a season for war, a season for peace. Right. And I'm not necessarily saying right now, this is war, let's go out there. That's not the point I'm making, but the point is that obviously those two things are juxtaposed against each other. So we need to be able to hold them both and understand. And I think for me, when I'm thinking through how we're talking about things, and when we use things like ridicule, when we use things like mockery, or even things like anger, the posture I think that is important for Christians to maintain is it's always in defense of either the glory and honor of God's name and his purpose, or of the least of these, or of people who are being hurt.
Exactly.
And so I've got no problem getting out and condemning and calling out people who are sterilizing and chemically castrating and surgically castrating kids.
Yes, absolutely.
And murdering unborn children and hurting their moms and
peddling white collar dope dealers, peddling medical
Yeah.
marijuana. I mean,
absolutely.
Exactly. Like all of these things. Like it's we have to recognize that these are all tools at our ability to defend what God cares so much about. I want to bring it back though to this interaction that you guys have had with social media. Have you guys gotten any, when you're dealing with these social media companies, have you gotten any inside look, any inside peek as to what's actually going on with them and their general bigotry towards not just, I mean, obviously broadly conservatism, but in particular Christianity? What's been the experience? What have you seen from them and how they view Christians or conservative? Or have you gotten any sign of how they treat you or look at you?
Well, as far as Facebook goes, I've talked to a few people who are, I guess I want to protect them, associated with Facebook in different ways, who have told me straight up that there are higher ups at Facebook who love the Babylon Bee, and they're terrified of anyone finding out. It's kind of a secret thing. There is a hatred, I think, for our worldview and kind of what we're trying to say. I don't know. It's almost, I grew up in kind of Christian fundamentalism, and it's kind of the same thing. It's like this leftist version of Christian fundamentalism where, once someone is deemed to be kind of unsafe or an outsider, not one of us, all of the people who are following kind of they will also kind of follow suit, and like, we have to shun that person. They don't need to know why. They just, for the sake of this system that we've created, we have to protect the system. We have to shun these people. And I think that it goes that way anywhere you look in Silicon Valley, and whether it's Twitter or Facebook. I haven't gotten any inside look at what's going on at any of these other companies that you guys wouldn't know about. I mean, we've seen what Project Veritas kind of revealed about how a lot of Twitter employees think. I follow a lot of Twitter employees on Twitter and kind of get to see how they react to things. And the overall feeling I get from them is that they're very angry, scared people, and I don't know.
So you were the Christian fundamentalist who was sneaking around watching Dave Chappelle specials.
Yes,
in your basement before your
exactly right. Yeah. So I feel like I know these people like the back of my hand. Like I was one of them. It really is kind of the new fundamentalism, and so in that sense, there's a feeling of empathy I have toward them. I want to help these people break out because I know how miserable they are.
So Joel, what you guys have had, the Bee has had a crazy interaction with the soon-to-be owner of Twitter and Elon Musk. And I have to say, when I saw that you guys got the interview with Elon, I laughed to myself, and I meant to tweet this at you that you didn't get to be there for the interview, that you were the one too radical from the Bee to be in the interview with Elon Musk. At least that's what I thought to myself.
Yeah.
But what has been the experience with Elon Musk that you guys have had? What's the, I guess the hope that you would have with him taking over one of the biggest social media giants out there? But also, are there concerns that you guys have in that?
Yeah. So it's been interesting. I remember the first couple times he, would share our article or respond to something that me or Kyle or one of our writers wrote. That was quite a thrill. And then, yeah, it just kind of escalated from there. I think at some point we just DM'd him on Twitter and said, hey, you want to talk sometime? And he immediately DM'd us back and said, yeah, let's get together. And so, like, without planning anything, like without coming up with questions or anything, like we just met. Like that's what that interview was. It was like mere hours after we had set this up. And so it was wild. And with Elon, I think I don't know. I'm excited on one hand because I think Elon is kind of the only person who would be crazy enough to buy Twitter. Twitter's a poorly run business. It's ideologically motivated, and I think Elon kind of has that kind of higher vision that's needed to turn Twitter around. But at the same time, he's not a believer. He's not going to. I think some of the things that he said is that the ideal social media is going to make both the right and the left, the extreme right and extreme left, equally angry. And I think my concern with that is that, well, the extremes don't matter so much as where the Overton window is. A lot of time it's the people on the fringes that are the ones doing the work to get our culture back to where it needs to be. If you're off the path, it's the one on the fringe right or the fringe left that's doing the polling to bring humanity back on that path. So the goal isn't to just be in the center of the Overton window. If you don't have I think the advantage that Christians have is we have this basis for our worldview. We have a basis for our entire morality. We know where truth comes from. We know where human rights come from. And when you don't have all that, when you think that there is no God and human beings are just bags of chemicals, what does that end up doing to your worldview? And so I think Elon's well-intentioned, and we're excited to see where he takes it. But obviously, he's by no means perfect. He's not a savior. So we know that God can use him any way he sees fit, and we're kind of trusting God in this, that whatever he decides to do is what he'll do.
That's awesome. Hey, I want to, you were talking about as we start to wind down here, Joel, you were talking about how you guys have been deplatformed and all that, and you just experienced that with your email. This is one of those big issues as we're talking about things like woke capitalism and the real. Yeah. It's one thing that we can kind of mock at or get frustrated at, like we are here of the corporate sponsorship of pride parades, which again, I every time we deal with the sexual orientation, gender identity bill here in Ohio, the Equality Act, and they compare it to the civil rights movement, I like to pull up a picture of Martin Luther King's March on Washington and the Pride Parade here in Columbus, and just point out the corporate sponsors of the Pride Parade compared to the March on Washington. One of these groups is an oppressed minority. The other doesn't seem that way. But I digress.
Yeah.
But there is a really tangible and practical concern we have about this in terms of, it would be fairly easy for a Amazon Web Services, right, which the majority of websites are built on, right, or a large portion of websites are built on, or Google or Salesforce or a lot of these platforms or banks, to basically pull a Jenga piece and say, hey, if you have discriminatory views that we view are as bigoted, you can't use our platform. And just like that, every church, pregnancy center, Christian-owned business is deplatformed.
Mm-hmm.
So as you guys are looking at even just how you run your business, how are you thinking through this? How do you think the church should be thinking through these things today?
Ooh. Yeah, that's a good question. I can speak to, I guess, how the Babylon Bee is handling it is that we've done everything we can to kind of build our own stuff. So, our website is our own, our servers are our own. We even have a social media attached to our site. So if you subscribe to the Babylon Bee, you can join kind of this. It's like a cross between Facebook and Twitter. You can share things with other Bee subscribers, and you have a kind of a profile that you can have, and it's been really great. It's been a great community that we've built. So even it's not much, but it's our own little social media. And I think beyond that, I probably wouldn't be the expert to I guess to say what our way out of this is. When we're talking about major corporations who are connected to government powers and to each other, how do you break that up? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
but I think your point about having our own platforms, thinking, even I now feel convicted of that I'm not a Babylon Bee subscriber, but but the ideas of thinking of how today do we start building out platforms, building out options, for us to go to, because I don't feel like it's too far off in the future. We just had another, and we'll probably do an episode this volume on this. We just had another supporter friend who, a lot of folks use what's called donor advised funds to give donations to charitable organizations. And he had his money with one sort of secular foundation here that he did all of his giving through. And he wanted to write a check to an allied organization of ours that's out there supporting life, marriage, and family and religious freedom. And the foundation said, no, we don't allow you to make donations of your own money to this organization because we think they're a hate.
Wow.
So you can't give your money there. To which, he's saying, all right, well, I'm taking all my money out of you and I'm going elsewhere to something like a National Christian Foundation, or something like that. But that's happening. And there's a certain level of having alternatives that we need to be focusing on.
I agree. I think in the short term, it's going to be painful. But I think there are some groups out there that are doing it right. I think that individuals are starting to be educated a little more as to, what these companies are doing, where their money's going. I mean, 401ks and retirement funds are another big thing, where's your money and who are you supporting with your retirement funds? I think in the short term, it's going to be painful, and there's a lot of building that needs to be done. But I think in the long term, it could be a really great thing. If we can start to build our own networks and our own systems, and not rely on these guys. I think that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, Joel Berry, thanks for all you do with the Babylon Bee. Thanks for all that, for joining us and sharing your stories, man. Follow, you guys can find Babylon Bee everywhere except for Twitter and TikTok, apparently. But be sure you can still find Joel on Twitter, who's a good follow, and you can see him have some fun with.
I'm a lot nicer in real life than I seem on Twitter, probably.
Well, appreciate you making the time, and thanks for joining us on this episode of The Narrative. We'll be back next week.